What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate. Look, I'm so appreciative of the content that we create day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year for the past 5+ years. Yo, it's been a journey. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been rocking with us. If you didn't know, I'm going to tell you right now, we exist to center and amplify Black and brown folks at work. And we do that by having really frank, authentic conversations. Think about like the conversations you have with a friend or a colleague or a mentor or aspiring mentor or a mentee over drinks or coffee or whatever. It's when you're really having those real conversations about career and life and navigating the workplace. I was not privileged to have a ton of those conversations, but the 5 that I did really blessed me. Now I'm playing. I had more than 5. I mean, come on, I've been working for a while. So I've had more than 5. It feels like I feel like I can count the really authentic conversations though on one hand. And I just remember years ago thinking about what does it look like to bottle that up and make it accessible to thousands of people, because everyone isn't privileged to have someone that looks like you pull you aside over coffee or just on the side and give you the real talk. And that's what Living Corporate is all about. Yes, you're listening to the flagship show, but Living Corporate is a network of shows, and everything that we do is based around authentically centering and amplifying historically marginalized voices at work by investigating, interrogating the systems, and imagining a better, more equitable place to work. Yes, we fall into the diversity, equity, inclusion space, but we don't really use that language like that because a lot of that has been co-opted, watered down, and centered around people that don't really need it. We're trying to have authentic conversations every single day that center and amplify the people that actually need to be centered and amplified, which are Black and brown people, Black and brown women, Black and brown queer folks, Black and brown trans folks, Black and brown non-binary folks, Black and brown disabled folks, Black and brown first generation people, right? Black and brown folks, period, right? That's what we're trying to do. And so thank you so much. I'm excited about the conversation you're about to listen to. We'll be right back. Tricia, welcome to the show. How you doing? Hey, it's nice to see you. It's nice to meet you. I'm really excited about our conversation.
I'm doing great. Nice to see you, Zach.
I get really passionate about, I mean, honestly, this is why Living Corporate exists, right? Like, it's all about having like really frank conversations about the lived experiences of historically marginalized perspectives and people, and really like the intersection of those lived experiences, like within the world of work. Now, look, you have, you're a lot of different things, like in a lot of different spaces, right? So between like being like a mentor and a coach and an executive and an author and a speaker, like,
yeah,
you're all over the place, like in terms of like just your brand and your level of efficacy. I'm curious, like, what did it look like for you to like understand how to show up like as a leader in all these different spaces and places? Like, what was that journey like for you?
That's a great question. And, you know, when I started my career, I certainly did not imagine that I would be in all these different places. And I think, you know, my family probably questions all of my decisions. But, you know, when I started so I'm a first generation Latina. My mom is from El Salvador. My dad's from Ecuador, grew up in LA. And, you know, education was a priority for them. And when I started, you know, went to college, law school, and I started my career in big corporate law. And I really had no playbook for how I could do that. You know, I didn't have a family network, you know, colleague, anybody to really explain it. So, and my parents, you know, they suffered from discrimination as immigrants, and they had thick Spanish accents. So they had advised me to assimilate, you know, blend in. I didn't have an accent. It'll be easier for you. So that was the advice that I got. And that is how I started my career, and frankly, downplayed my ethnicity for about 20 years. and really just climbed the corporate ladder. To me, dealing with gender bias in a pretty male-dominated space of corporate, and I was in enterprise software. It's a male-dominated space, so gender bias was enough. But what resulted in that was not, adapting, like you said, I'm in all these spaces, and so I had to adapt to figure out how to survive in those spaces. I had to put up a lot of armor to protect myself from the realities of being in those spaces. And in some ways, in a lot of ways, over 2 decades, it was traumatic in some ways and caused trauma. But in some ways, I have a skill of adaptability. And so now when you ask the question, how do I show up in all these spaces? I really have perfected the ability to scan a room, evaluate who's there, what's going on. Do I have, allies in the room? Do I not? Am I going to show up? How am I going to show up that is both safe to me in that moment, and continue the work that I'm doing on advocating for equity in the workplace? And so, and I've tried to now, in this stage of my life and career, I've had the great fortune of being able to be in leadership positions, grow a network, and have the privilege to be in spaces where I can continue to have a voice to try to make things different. And I have an ear for, some of those because I have relationships. So
you talk
I try
about,
to leverage that and try to make
coming into a space, and you being your parents coming from South America, and really coming in and being told to assimilate. And you said you did that for 2 decades. So talk to me about what does that practically look like to hide or shrink parts of yourself, and practically speaking, when you say you assimilated, what does that look like practically?
Yeah. So practically speaking, it looks like straightening my hair. I'm naturally curly hair, so I would straighten it because to me, what I saw in media and in the workplace was, straight hair means professional. The way I dressed, I looked around and said, okay, well, black and blue, navy blue suits is how you're a lawyer. That's what a lawyer looks like. It looks like my language, what language I use. I have a loud laugh, and we're a loud family coming from Ecuador, and so dampening that laugh and dampening the way my mannerisms and the way I show up. I didn't talk about my family. I didn't talk about the celebrations that we might have celebrated that were different, or the food that we ate that was different than what those around me were eating. I hid the fact that I didn't know, I came from working class, so I was unfamiliar with different cuisines. I hadn't eaten sushi and lobster and knew the different wines, and so I had to figure out how to just pretend that I knew some of these things. And so it's constantly just trying to learn what the dominant environment around me accepted as what everybody around me looked and ate and seemed like, and tried to adapt myself to fit that, because I didn't see anyone like me. There were no women in leadership. There were no women of color, no Latinas for much of my career. So I didn't know how.
I get it's just sad to hear, right? Because I think about also I wonder if there were ever moments in your career where maybe things were said or done around you that you felt were really offensive, and that you had to just swallow in the spirit of, let me just focus on the career. If it isn't too trigger or re-traumatizing, do you have any examples of that?
Oh yeah, I mean, it happens all the time because I could, if you will, pass. there would be derogatory comments around, and still are, around immigration, around Latinos, affirmative action, diversity mandates in the workplace. Even now, my girls are going through college application process, and being in spaces where, because I live in a predominantly white community, the injustice of affirmative action programs, and I'm constantly in those spaces where people aren't realizing that they're talking about me, and my life and my lived experience, and it wasn't a safe space, nor did I have the strength or tools back then to stand up to it or to call it out. I allowed myself to be uncomfortable in the priority to make sure everyone around me was comfortable, because I knew that if I said, wait a minute, I'm going to question that or combat, I have a different opinion, it would make people uncomfortable. And so, it was strategies that I think many of us use to, protect ourselves and to do it. But what a disservice. I mean, I think what I learned, and maybe we'll go into like, how did I change, but what a disservice that was to not only myself, my own emotional well-being, but for those in the workplace. I so desperately wanted to see what a Latina leader looked like, a successful one. I so desperately wanted to see what a successful working mother in leadership looked like, and I didn't see it. And by me downplaying or hiding that part of my life, what a disservice that is to the women and women of color coming up to the organization. I'm not sure.
Well, first of all, I mean, I say this because I think about, so like one of my some of my diversity is very visible, right? That doesn't change the fact that that darker skin, Black folks and and darker skin Latina folk, Latin folks, as well as other people, like they don't try to still hide who they are, or rather shrink parts of themselves. But man, I really applaud the fact that you're able to, that you look back and you say, man, okay, like I'm like, you didn't stay there, right? Like, and the fact that that's part of your journey, like that's very inspiring to me. Everybody, I don't know, Tricia, like honestly, I meet a lot of people who, they forget who they are, that's not, like, just to say it straight up, is they just forget who they are. And then to the point where when they then see someone else, to your point, you're looking for someone who, like, what does it look like to be like a Latina in leadership, like in this industry. When they finally see someone who is living like that, their own insecurities, it then turns them resentful or frustrated or ashamed because of their own shortcomings. So I think that's super dope. I mean, I definitely want us to get into and talk about like the work that you've been doing, as well as your own award-winning business memoir, Embracing the Power of You, Owning Your Identity at Work. Like, I would just love to understand, like, at what point did that switch and say, you know what? No, I am not just a woman. I happen to also be I'm a child of immigrants. I'm a first generation American. Like what happened? Like, what was there a particular moment for you to say, you know what? No, this is who I am.
Yeah. Yes and no. There was a particular moment that I'll share, but it also was a journey. I would say that I would say about 10 or 12 years into my career, I just kept hitting so many walls, and I kept having to overcome over and over again. I didn't know, I know now based on research and education that there were biases and microaggressions and all the things, but I didn't know what was happening. I just, I was resilient and I just kept going. But over time, that takes a toll. And so I had reached a point where I was just really emotionally and physically exhausted. It was just exhausting. And so I had taken some time away from kind of corporate and started my own consulting business, and really just get out of that, day-to-day, environment. But then I also, that was a time of self-reflection and a time of really unpacking a lot of these things. And so that's where I say that I would say that's when kind of the journey started of just really reflecting, like, why am I feeling like this? What is happening? I mean, that took years. That took a long time to really reflect. When I got past, not past, but when I unpacked a lot of things over years, I found myself in a fantastic opportunity at a company called Looker, who had a great environment. And at that point, let me backtrack a little bit. One of the things that in my life that was incredibly hard was when I first had my daughter. I was in an all-male leadership team, and I knew that, and there were no women in leadership, and I knew that it would not be well received that I was going to go out on maternity leave because they really relied on me and all the things. So when I announced my pregnancy, my then manager said to me, "How could you do this to me? I've seen this movie."
Hold on, everybody stop. Wait a second.
Literally didn't talk to me for weeks.
Nope.
And that was the response I got. Yeah.
Wait. I'm sorry. So I have two daughters. My wife is fortunate enough to make me a father. You're saying that you were pregnant and your boss said, "How could you do this to me?" What did you say when he said that to you?
I was frozen. I just froze. I didn't, I was the sole breadwinner of my family. I didn't know. I didn't say anything. I mean, like I said, he walked away. And so I had to sit with that. And I knew that he was unhappy. I knew that I needed this job. I was about to go on maternity leave. I couldn't leave. I needed to have benefits. Didn't have much of a choice. And so I tried to make the transition as easy as possible. But as a result, and I talk about this in my book, I didn't just downplay being a Latina. I downplayed being a mother, a working mother. And when I returned from maternity leave, my daughter wouldn't take the bottle. She would only nurse. Despite weeks of trying to train her, she wouldn't take the bottle. And so we didn't have nursing rooms, and we didn't have any women. I didn't know what to do. And so I would nurse her in the parking garage secretly until we could get her onto the bottle. Because I feared, the reaction that I got for being pregnant and going on maternity leave was so bad that to me to go back into that space and say I need to leave every 3 hours. This was, we didn't have flex time or remote or anything. Felt very risky. So that, as you can imagine, was traumatic. That whole entire experience as being a working parent and a working mother was incredibly hard. And so fast forward to that moment at Looker, there was a woman going out on maternity leave, and I decided she needs to have a different experience than me. It's just, she needs to feel supported. We need to have resources. It just has to be different. We need to change things. And we had a great culture, and that's where we started the DEI program. We didn't have one. And we started the DEI program because of that. A year later, we had 12 employee resource groups, one of which was a Latinx group. And they asked me to tell my story during Hispanic Heritage Month. And that was the first time anyone had really asked me to tell my story publicly in my workplace. And so that moment of, wow, what does that mean, telling my story? Are people going to look at me differently? Am I going to be judged? I had a ton of fear around it, because of all the things, all the things I had heard in the workplace prior to this, not at that place. But I did it anyways. And the impact that story had on the employees, and particularly the Latino employees and Latinas. I had several Latinas come up to me and just say, like, they were in tears, just Your story is my story. I've never seen a Latina in leadership. Thank you. That's when I decided I must change the way I'm showing up because it matters to others and it makes a difference. And I think that's when it clicked that by me not being visible for that next generation, I'm just going to continue complicit in this whole system and
I'm
process.
curious,
So
like, I
I
mean,
needed
and
to change.
you have the privilege of hindsight, and you also have the privilege of having such a long and illustrious career. Do you feel like if you had shown up more authentically to who you are or who you were at the time, that you would have had the same, similar, or more success that you did experience?
I certainly don't think more. When I started my career was, 25 years ago, things were different. At least we had a lot of work still to do, but we've made progress. We were not having these kinds of conversations back then. And there were not allies. We didn't have words around it. So I don't think I have the tools to withstand because there would have been backlash. And I don't know that I would have had the strength or the tools to figure out, or frankly, the support. We didn't have affinity groups, we didn't have organizations, or, I mean, maybe, but not to the extent that we have them now. So I wouldn't have known where to go to be in a safe space to say, oh my God, can you imagine? This is what happened to me. This is what they said to me. How do I, am I crazy? Am I hearing that right? Like I didn't have anybody to bounce things off of. So I don't know that I could have had the just tools to get through that. I don't know that anybody, I think this is unconscious bias, right? I don't know that anybody necessarily would have treated me badly. I mean, maybe some, but I don't think so. I think it's all unconscious. I think it's people are not recognizing the impact of their words. And had I had the strength and better grounding in who I was, then
Yeah, I
I
mean,
could have done it, but I just don't think I personally
I think it's incredible
had
and a beautiful thing that you're here in this space now, showing up now. So let's talk more about your book, right? Like you're in this, you have the beauty of I'm not gonna say you're like a sage, right? But you have this incredible story and this background of hiding parts of yourself. So I think you are in this unique position of what it really means to really encourage and give wisdom as to really being your full, owning your full identity. So when we talk about the real you, and we say, okay, you be yourself, and people always want to be yourself. What does that really mean? What does it mean to really be yourself at work, especially when you talk about embracing and celebrating every aspect of who you are?
Yeah. I think it's a really difficult thing to say for everybody. It depends. I think there is a level of agency around it that matters. I think that there may be things that the space around you hasn't earned the right to hear. And that's a choice that you need to make. But I do think that if you are not comfortable bringing your whole self, with meaning your lived experience, whether it's race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, economic, all the things that make up who you are, then you put up armor. And that armor, what it does is it creates a barrier between you and others, whether that's your colleagues, your managers. And so you never really create that human connection. And that human connection is what makes you excited to go to work. It's what makes you engaged. It allows you to talk about real things that are happening. For example, I'm in the stage now where I have elderly parents, and there are moments where I have to go and take care of them. And so if you have to hide any part of your life, whether it's the birth of a child, an elderly parent, the grief of a loved one, a miscarriage. There's so many things that happen to us as people, as humans. And if you have this facade that you put up because you're the culture, or because you're afraid it will be rejected, you're just not going to make that connection that makes you excited about showing up. And so it's a process to feel comfortable doing it. And I think everyone's on their own journey. But I do believe that getting on the other side of that journey, that's when you really find your magic. That's when you really can soar. Because at the end of the day, people love real people. They love and get connected to people that share their vulnerabilities and talk about the challenges, because we all have that.
I think, and this is where I think a lot of these like conversations, they go wrong, and not in like what you're saying. Hey, charging the individual, typically the historically marginalized, and or just like non-majority person at work to be themselves, and or to like really understand and do the inner work of just like, hey, like, how do I celebrate me, and what do I really want like on my billboard as I'm walking down the street, metaphorically. I think where we mess up is we like really index on the individual, but we don't talk about the systems and structures to facilitate even like giving people the grace and safety to do that. Yeah. Right. So I'm curious, like, as someone who sat like in the senior most executive seats, like, you were like a senior executive, you were a junior executive, you were a mid-level manager, you were a frontline leader, and you were also an individual contributor. Like, what do you believe is critical for leaders, like those who actually control the organization, right? Not someone with just the title, but the people who actually call the shots, like those executive level leaders. What do you think is critical for them to understand so that the Tricia Montalvo Timms at their organizations don't feel the need to shrink themselves, any element of themselves, at work? Like, what do you think that they need to be mindful of? And frankly, what do they need to be doing?
Yeah, they need to be doing the work. And I think, a lot of us in this space, those historically marginalized are the ones doing the work, and not the other way around. And, I think you're exactly right, Zach, that the space needs to also do the work. And, at the top line leadership, it needs to be intentional. One of the things that my CEO at my last company at Looker, he had an aha moment where he realized that he believes in DEI, believes in it, thinks it's the right thing to do, but wasn't intentional about how we were going to get there. And when he had that moment and realized that we had to keep the executive team accountable, that we had to have metrics, and we had to have cultural surveys, and we had to have feedback, that's intentionally trying to create a space of belonging versus believing that it's a good thing to have. So I think intention is an important piece of it. And I think it has to also go down the line. I think manager training is so important, because at the end of the day, a person, when they're at work, even if, we have all the right corporate diversity statements and policies and whatnot, your experience is with that of your manager. And so if your manager is not creating psychological safety with you, it doesn't matter what the policies say, right? Because you are not going to feel safe. And I think how you can gain psychological safety at work, as managers and leaders, we have to be curious about others, learn about differences, be in spaces with other people that are different from you. Take a look around your social circles, and does it all look the same, or is there any difference there? Recognize where your own biases might be. We all have biases. So what are they? Do that work, and then be vulnerable about it. We are also all going to make mistakes. And so getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, getting comfortable saying you're sorry and how can I be better when you make that mistake, and not being afraid to try, because many people are nervous about this conversation, especially in leadership. They want to get it wrong. And I think that, having the courage to take that risk and
then,
do some of the
if
work.
you could talk to, you earlier in this conversation, you talked about two things. First off, you talked about the fact that, your skin tone enabled you to pass in certain ways and spaces that maybe other Latino, Latinx folks could not. Right. So I'm curious, what do you think? Actually, I'm glad this isn't live because I don't want to ask that question. I'm gonna ask this question instead. So Aaron, clean that up. So when we talk about like this intersection of like just different identities, right? So it's race, it's gender, it's sexual orientations, disability, visible and invisible disability, for being a first generation citizen or not, things of that nature. Like colorism comes into play as well. I'm curious, like, and we're having this conversation we're publishing this conversation in the middle of Hispanic Heritage Month. Like, what would you say are like the key drivers to combat colorism within the Latinx community?
That's a great question. I think even within our own community, we have a lot of bias. We are
and educate me right now.
Latino. This is the other thing.
Educate
There's so
me.
many different words, and I know. What I say to people is simply ask what people's preferences are, because there is no standard. I think my generation, we use Latino, I use Latina. I recognize Latino is male pronoun, and, it doesn't cover, all genders.
Respect.
It's just something that I got used to, so it doesn't bother me. But it bothers a lot of people, right? So Latinx is the younger generation. Many people don't like Hispanic because it has some other connotations. So,
thank you.
I don't, you just ask, what's your preference? Yeah. But within our community, the Latino community, we are very diverse. Some of us speak Spanish, some of us don't. Some of us speak Portuguese. We are from different countries. We have Afro Latinas. We have first generation, second generation immigrants. We have, it is just across the board very diverse. And as a result, I think, and we have, racism within our own community, depending on any slice that you take that, and so I think that we have our own work to do in our community of how do we come together. The Latino community is the fastest growing demographic in this country. We are 1 in 5 in the U.S. We are 40% of the population in California. We are a huge demographic, but we don't come together as well as we could as a demographic because of things like colorism and other things. And so I think we have to be honest about that as a community, and know that if we come together, we have a lot more ability to influence and change structures. But while we're the biggest demographic, we're the least represented.
100%. I think that is like, leadership. First of all, we just had a real moment right here in this conversation, which I'm so excited about. But it's like, there's this temptation to just bundle everybody in one group, right? Like the Latina community is super huge, right? It kind of reminds me of like the Asian community, right? Like sometimes you say Asian, you think it's like, oh, it's like, yo, there's like tens of thousands of cultures and groups and experiences represented in these groups. Like when you just say, like, to your point, use the term Hispanic or Asian or whatever, it's like, yo, you're erasing and really insulting like a large group of people, irrespective of your intention. Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to ask that question. So my next question I was really excited about because you said something. I was like, okay, I'm gonna put a pin in that. So you said everyone doesn't deserve, like you have to make a decision that people deserve, like what it is you want to share. That's like I think that's like a very self-aware and emotionally intelligent place to be. Like, how does one make a determination as to like what other people are worthy of knowing about them? Like, I think that's I don't know if that's something that like, I'm gonna say across the board, like just black and brown folks across the board. I don't know if we always even like are operating in that mode. So can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference now was I was operating unconsciously before. I didn't really recognize, I had normalized so much my downplaying and assimilating that I didn't even recognize what I was doing with that. And so if there was a comment, derogatory comment or otherwise that was happening, I sort of just pack it away and, move it forward and don't, and choose not to respond to it. And now I'm aware of it. I'm aware of who I'm more aware. I think we're always on a journey, so there's always learning, but I am more aware of who I am, where I come from, the pain those types of comments make, the risk that there might be in showing up, vulnerably in a situation. And the difference now is I have agency over that. I now make a decision. Is this the time where I'm going to question that comment? Do I have the toolkit to do it? Do I have allies in the room to support me? And it can change from day to day. I can decide today that, yes, I am good. That one is really important. I'm not going to let that one slide, and I'm going to confront it. And tomorrow I could be dealing with personal things at home, or kids or aging parents or whatever, and I don't have the emotional, not in the great emotional state to take on racism at work. So I may choose not to, but it's having agency and making that decision consciously, rather than before. I just wasn't combating anything because I didn't really recognize how that was impacting me, how it was impacting others. What was,
if you could
the
go
larger
back
issue around
and
it.
tell Tricia back in, let's say, like 1998, 3 things, and frankly, maybe these 3 things also might apply to like other first gen Latina, aspiring world changers and executives and authors and all the things that you are now. Like, what are those 3 things you would tell yourself?
The first thing I would tell myself is, you are enough. You are enough. And I think that, as I go and talk about this book, the greatest impact I'm having is in that generation, those that are starting their careers, and almost gives them permission to be themselves. And I wish I knew that I was enough, and that what I brought to the table mattered, that my voice mattered, that my opinions mattered, and that I was not there as a mistake, that I earned my spot, and that I deserve to be in the room. So that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is, you can't go through this journey alone. You need to find your people, whether that's a personal champion, whether that's a mentor, whether that's an executive coach, a community, going through organizations and corporate and all the things. There's a lot to learn, and trying to learn on your own, you don't need to do it. There are people out there that are going to support you, and so lean on those mentors and sponsors to help you. And then the last thing I think I would say is hard work is not enough. The way you climb the ladder and build and scale and is through authentic relationships. People call it networking, but I believe it is building authentic relationships with people that see your value and staying in touch and investing and nurturing those over time. Every opportunity that I got in my career was from somebody that I worked with, and it was up and down, people that were senior to me and the people that were junior to me. So everyone matters as you go through your career, and treating everyone with respect and finding how you can help them. I think all of this, comes back around. So,
well, look, Tricia, it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. This has been a fire conversation, and we count you as a friend of the show. You're more than welcome to come back anytime, and it's always love. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Peace. And we're back. Yo, thank you so much for listening to Living Corporate. You know where we at. We're everywhere you listen to podcasts. You know what I'm saying? We're literally everywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about Living Corporate, living-corporate, please say the dash.com, or just Google Living Corporate. You know what I'm saying? At this point, SEO is pretty popping. You type in Living Corporate, we're going to pop up somewhere. Okay. Make sure you check us out. Links in the show notes. So you learn more about us, learn what we're trying to do. Make sure you actually create a profile on living-corporate.com. Okay. Make a profile on there so you can actually stay in tune and up to date with what we got going on. You make a profile, you select content that you're really interested in, and then we'll push content to you from our library. So you can actually have a curated experience every time you go and log into Living Corporate. Ain't that dope? Okay. Think about that. We got over 1,000 podcasts and different digital media and content that we've made over the years. And it's going to be all pushed and curated for you, baby. For you, dog. For you. All right. Till next time. I love you. Take care of yourself. Peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.